In early December 1963, a group of amateur criminals gathered in Los Angeles, California. Their goal was simple: quick wealth. They believed that kidnapping the child of a famous star would grant them the fortune they had always dreamed of. However, they had no idea how complicated the operation would become. By December 8th, they had made up their minds and set their sights on their target, Frank Sinatra Jr., the son of America's most famous singer. They had entered a world they didn't fully understand, where things moved faster than they had ever imagined. The atmosphere was calm at the Sinatra family home, as Frank Jr. was inside, thinking it would be just another ordinary day. But in an instant, the criminals stormed the house, armed and determined to carry out their plan. They burst into the house, quickly took control of the situation, and kidnapped Frank without him being able to resist. This was the beginning of one of the most notorious incidents in US history. Meanwhile, Frank Sinatra Sr. was miles away, unaware of the nightmare unfolding at home. After the kidnapping, Frank Sinatra Jr. was in the hands of his captors, who demanded a massive ransom, $240,000. The criminals believed they were on the verge of securing their fortune. On the other side, the Sinatra family was in shock, and the police were already in contact with authorities. The situation grew more complex, and no one knew how it would unfold. The ransom was a huge amount, and if it wasn't paid on time, the consequences would be devastating. The police took the kidnapping reports seriously and immediately began collecting evidence. With each step, the case seemed more complicated. Police teams were combing through every corner, from trying to trace the kidnappers to checking every security camera in the area. As the investigation progressed, signs of tension began to appear on the faces of people in the city. Days passed, and the anxiety grew among both the family and the investigators. While the police worked tirelessly, Frank Sinatra Sr. was caught in a sea of sorrow and worry. He couldn't believe that his son had been kidnapped. It felt like a real-life nightmare. He started receiving calls from the police, but each time the news was more stressful. As a father, he felt utterly powerless and didn't know what to do. Even though the investigators were pressuring him to pay the ransom, he remained uncertain, hoping for a solution that wouldn't risk his son's life. As time passed, investigators began to uncover new clues that might lead them to the kidnappers. An abandoned car, faint leads about their possible location. The investigators started connecting the dots, and some evidence suggested that the kidnappers were not as professional as they had initially thought. Despite this, there was still no confirmed details about where Frank Jr. was being held, and the investigators were in a race against time. Everything was shrouded in mystery. At this point, authorities decided to involve the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, which intensified the pressure on the kidnappers. They sent in specialized agents, and while they were optimistic about solving the case quickly, the chaos left behind by the kidnappers only made things more complicated. It became a battle of wits between the police and the criminals, with each side trying to outsmart the other with strategic moves. As the newspapers and media in Los Angeles ramped up their coverage, numerous rumors circulated about where Frank Jr. might be held. Some said he was in an abandoned house outside the city, while others mentioned a hideout in the mountains. The conflicting reports only added to the confusion, leaving everyone in a state of panic and uncertainty. While the investigators continued their search, it seemed that every lead was just another distant possibility. Time was not on their side. As time went on and the kidnappers refused to back down from their demands, negotiations began. The talks were tense, and with each passing moment, the situation grew more fraught with anxiety. Each side tried to impose its conditions, but everyone knew that Frank Jr.'s life was at risk. Speculations about how it would all end made the atmosphere even more charged. Would the family pay the ransom? Or would the police succeed in rescuing the son without the need to hand over the money? At a critical moment, investigators discovered the kidnappers' abandoned car in a remote area. This discovery marked a new beginning as they started following the clues around it. Were the kidnappers nearby, or was the car just a decoy to mislead the police? The signs pointed to the criminals being close, but there were still no clear answers. Tension was building, and every step brought new surprises. After days of relentless searching, the police were finally able to locate the kidnappers' hideout. They identified the criminals and arrested them. It was a shocking turn of events. However, even with the criminals in custody, many questions remained unanswered. How had these criminals managed to infiltrate the life of one of America's most famous singers? Was there anyone else involved in the plot? In the end, part of the ransom was paid, and Frank Sinatra Jr. was released after a long period of suffering and waiting. When he returned home, the entire city exhaled in relief. However, despite his return, there remained a bitter aftertaste from the events of those harrowing days. The lingering question was, how should such incidents be handled in the future? In the trial of the kidnappers, the atmosphere was charged with drama. All the criminals had lengthy criminal records and had caused much pain for the Sinatra family. The trial was a pressure cooker, with the case brought to court on charges of kidnapping and threats. In the end, justice prevailed, but there were still lingering questions left unanswered. Years passed, and in time, 2 of the main kidnappers were released after serving long sentences. While this brought relief to some, others felt that justice had not been fully served. Nevertheless, the scrutiny on them remained high, and the city would not easily forget one of the most infamous kidnapping cases in American history. This case remains one of the most famous and bizarre kidnapping cases in US history. It caused deep shock to the Sinatra family and to many Americans who were following the unfolding events. While the story eventually ended, its aftermath remained etched in the memories of many. The kidnapping of Frank Sinatra Jr. remains one of the most significant incidents that shaped American history in the 1960s. True story source: the kidnapping of Frank Sinatra Jr. occurred on December 8, 1963, and the case was closed in 1964 in California, United States.